Here's a fun fact. When you're in a group of people and somebody in that group says, my brothers and sisters, welcome to this meeting. Well, that's very likely an African talking, right? Because we are the ones who go by brother, my sister, right? So in that particular vein, permit me to say, my brother, my sister. Whether you're white, black, wherever you're from, hey, welcome to the African Diaspora channel. It is a podcast which is designed primarily to give you a window into the thoughts of the African in Africa. Of course, this one is tailored for the world all over. But then again, interestingly too, it also reflects the conversations happening in Africa about what's happening in the world. For example, one of which is our conversation for today. Now, my name happens to be Emmanuel Bisang. Well, in my local parlance, they call me Bisang the Boki man with the Ifok Mbakara kind of swagger. All right. Well, I'm not here alone to take you on this particular journey. I have with me the beautiful, the amazing, the sensational Miriam Annie. Hello, Miriam.
God. I think I like the part where you started with sensational.
I mean, you are sensational, aren't you?
Miriam Annie, indeed. And good morning, beautiful people from diaspora and Nigeria at large. Welcome. This segment is going to be very interesting.
Very interesting.
This song has already set the tone. I mean, I've been looking at him and smiling all day. And I think it has to do with AFCON. When you see a man, let me stereotype it. When you see a Nigerian man all smiles like this, he has football news for you.
So my goodness.
Let it go. Bring it on already.
Well, that's because in recent time, Africa has been speaking about the AFCON matches, and well, thankfully, as a Nigerian, I won't even sugarcoat this one. I'm quite very proud of my players in recent time. Yeah, but beyond AFCON, apparently, there's a big conversation which the world is having right now. That's because on the 3rd of January this particular year, it was more like an opener to the year, not a very good one depending on what part of the world you're in for some persons. That's the abduction of Nicolas Maduro. That's would I call him the former president? There's a new acting president right now. Right. So due to reasons which Donald Trump says, this particular matter branding him as one who has spearheaded narcotic terrorism in Venezuela. I don't know. It's quite a very bumpy ride. Lots of thoughts around this particular matter.
Tagging it Operation Absolute Resolve, does it for me the most. It is one thing to understand it a certain way. It is another thing for the nation itself to accept what you're talking about. What does the people of Venezuela have to say about this? These and many more, are the perspective to which we want to bring this morning. And to discuss the historical and diplomatic weight of this event, we're joined by two sound minds, the brightest minds from the University of Calabar. I'm talking of Professor David Imbua. He is a foremost expert in Atlantic history and the author of Calabar in the Atlantic Mirror. He specializes in the historical power dynamics of the Atlantic world. Good morning, sir.
Let me join you to say brothers and sisters. Good morning. Good morning, brothers and sisters, home and in the diaspora.
Absolutely. Well, just beside him, we also do have Dr. Boypa. He is a lecturer from History and International Studies in the University of Calabar here in Nigeria. Good morning to you. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. I was looking to that spirit, brother's spirit, sister's spirit. That's a good morning.
Well, you might be in the time zone where it's sunny, so bear with us on that particular matter. Yeah. But anyway, I think before we go on with the conversation, I really must say, you both look really good. Well tailored.
Very.
You look better.
Okay. All right, so let's go straight to the matter at hand. Prof. Dave, you've spent decades studying Atlantic cross-current and power dynamics. So would you say that we're witnessing a new era of diplomacy, or just the 19th century repeating itself?
Well, I wouldn't say we are witnessing a new era of diplomacy. This is an affront. The United Nations itself is surprised that this action has taken place, and they have said it's an illegality. So it has happened. The United States has invaded a number of countries in Latin America before, even in Africa, and step in here and there, but it should not be so at the very beginning.
The U.S. involvement, or invasion of Venezuela is actually a unilateral action that has no foundation in international law, right? And so I think it's already condemned. Most people have condemned that, and that's the position that should be, because what U.S. has done is actually uncalled for. It is against international law.
But in some level, though, it seems as though the UN seems helpless around the situation, if you ask me. Because, I mean, all the chief of the UN said was that it's a dangerous situation. I mean, is that all that can be said about this particular matter? Can they take some sanctions, some actions against the US?
I wonder what the UN can do.
You wonder?
I wonder what the UN. I don't think the UN can really, apart from coming out to to blame the US for what they have done, which they have always done. I mean, they have blamed Israel, they have blamed Russia. That's just have to blame. Now the point is that the UN, it does not stand on its own legs. It doesn't have its own legs to stand. And when it comes to a major power, the UN has always been deficient. And that's why this consent, to review the charter, to review the standing of the United Nations, to make it more potent and more relevant to the reality of the system, the world system today. So I don't think the UN can really do more than what they have done by blaming, the US for invading Venezuela.
Okay, and Donald Trump calls this the Don Rose Doctrine, and I would say that he's trying to imply that he's following the Monroe Doctrine of 1823. So would we, in your view, has the doctrine evolved into a tool for perspective of protective intervention?
Well, it's just making reference to that to justify his action. Whenever a man carries out an action, they look for a way to manipulate the system to favor them. Okay. It has nothing to do with that because, like we have said, it is wrong in international law. The United Nations itself, which we should all respect, has condemned it. It's not supposed to be. And Donald Trump cannot become the judge of the world or the judge for the cases around here. So if he had any issue, there are ways to go about it. There are legal issues to go about it. You cannot just wake up in the night and invade a country because you feel this and that. You cannot be the judge in your own case. So if the United States has issues with Venezuela, there are better ways to go about it. And we are saying that process has not been followed. So whatever thing anybody is saying is just to justify it, and it does not hold water at this time.
Okay. And then in your recent inaugural lecture, you spoke about Calabar in the Atlantic mirror. Yeah. So if we hold this mirror up to the Caribbean, how do these US actions in Venezuela compare to the 1989 capture of Manuel Noriega in Panama?
Well, the US have always, in fact, what runs across all the ages and time is that they've been looking for their interests. They accuse the action of Panama, they accuse of corruption, they accuse of trafficking, they accuse of narcotic drugs. It's the same thing they are saying today. And there is no country that the US want to invade that they will not frame up charges against. They cannot say you are a very good country, you are democratically stable, you are this, and we are coming to invade you. No, they must frame up charges. But sooner or later, the world may know that those charges were framed up because the democracy they want to promote will even turn out to be more chaotic than it was. And the United States itself has its own internal contradictions and problems there too. It's not as if it's very stable and all the people like what is happening. So US has always brought us those charges against nations they want to invade, and they will continue to do so. That is why it is important that even these countries we are talking about, they need to look inward and stabilize themselves and build very strong institutions that will make it difficult for foreign intervention and aggression. If not, people will always want to intervene when they have interest to achieve in your nations.
Okay, and this brings me to you, Dr. Egbe. You know that Venezuela is known to be one of the world's largest oil reserve currently. So it begs the question: how often, as historians, do we see regime change successfully divorced from resource control?
Well, thank you. Well, from what we see from empirical evidence, nations intervene in other countries essentially to satisfy some economic interest. We saw that when Iraq invaded Kuwait, the reason was to annex Kuwait so as to get the reserves, oil reserve that's in Kuwait, and that was the same reason why in 2003 U.S. led a coalition to invade Iraq. It was not sanctioned by the United Nations, and up to now, you still have some presence of U.S. in Iraq exploiting Iraqi oil. So it doesn't. It's basically, essentially, economic-based reason why countries or even U.S. invade other countries. So what's happening in Venezuela is not different from that same scenario. Of course, it is true that Venezuela has an oil reserve of 303 billion barrels. I think one of the highest in the world, and the U.S. is interested in this oil. Not recently. It's been there. The concern has been there. In fact, the U.S. had dominated Venezuela economy for many, many years. In fact, between 1958 to 1998, a number of years, it was U.S. dominating that economy, essentially oil economy. It was not until when Chavez came and decided that they're going to find that country anew, that beginning to have problems, with the United States. But that before then, there was no issue at all because they were busy exploiting the oil in Venezuela. So it is basically economic interest that is at stake.
Okay. I think one thing is very clear anyway, because Donald Trump seems to have made that very, very clear. In recent time, he spoke about that he insisted that Washington is now in charge of the Caribbean country, but he said he's prepared to work with the president, the acting president at this point in time. Now, the concern lots of persons have is with such interventions by the US, for example, we saw in the case of Libya, not too long ago, and now we have Venezuela. We saw the end of Libya, right? What it has become more like a shadow of what it used to be. Lots of persons said that that was to destabilize the country and all sorts and all that for the sake of interest again of the America. Now, in this case, where America has once again intervened in Venezuela, what do you think will become of this particular country? Donald Trump is very clear as to making demands and clearly speaks about his interest in the oil. But what do you see as the future of Venezuela given this particular situation? Would it become like a case of Libya, less than it used to be?
Well, the two circumstances are not exactly the same.
Okay.
In the case of Libya, it was a number of countries under NATO. It was a war situation. It's not exactly the same thing, in Venezuela. But it is the same.
Some said there were undertones, there were hidden agendas. They were all targeting oil as well at some degree.
That's the interest we're talking about.
Okay.
Some discussions were made, to infrastructure, oil infrastructure, and of course military infrastructure, civil infrastructure. So those things were actually destroyed, and that means in some respect, the issues actually the same in terms of destruction, but no, not in the scale that was observed in Libya.
Mm-hmm.
Now the point is that it's also going to depend upon the attitude, of the people of Venezuela. What is going to be the attitude? Now, as we speak, some support the invasion, some do not support the invasion. Understand? And the vice president Dicey has taken over, as the acting president. Now, the army too has also pledged to mobilize to defend the sovereignty, of the country. But it also depends on what Trump has in mind. Since the area is already, we are being told that they have imported between 30 and 50 million barrels of oil to the US. So it has already begun to play out as a matter of time. So I think the people greater to depend on the attitude of the people of Venezuela themselves.
Okay, now about the attitude now, let's look at what the acting president says. She says, "We are a people that do not surrender. We are a people that do not give up." She declared paying tribute to the martyrs of the U.S. attack. That doesn't seem like a, a cordial
At all.
a cordial response to the actions of America, even though some persons are saying that America was aided from within, the infrastructure. Do you see them, playing or towing the line of America? She's saying that we don't surrender, we never give up.
The point is that where was the army? Where was the army? What happened on 3rd January was the result of persistent U.S. engagement militarily in the region, the country, right? Right from August, where had been the military? They had actually betrayed the system. So for them to now come out to say where they want to do, let's hope that they make do. They live by their words. But I think there's a sense of betrayal, evidence of betrayal on the part of the army. Why you ever succeeded in doing all that?
So you feel like they were aided by some means?
Of course,
Someone
they
opened the
would
door
have
for
been.
them.
They would have been.
Okay.
They would have been. We are told that people, even the guard, compromise for some promises of relocation and financial rewards, and which is appear highly, it's true, because it is difficult for, I know that giving you a sophistication, they're more advanced than Israel they can afford to, but without a compromise from within, it has been difficult for the success of that nation to have been recorded.
Interesting.
Okay, so how does this move fit into Trump's, broader foreign policy agenda, especially for the non-aligned nations in Africa, like Africa?
Well, it has happened to Venezuela, and African nations need to be more careful with what is happening. It's no longer sufficient to say we are a sovereign nation, we have our sovereignty. They can intervene at any time, at any place. So whether they are aligned or non-aligned, what is important at this point is that African leaders should show more commitment to the building of their nations. They should promote unity among the people, both the rule and the rulers. It should no longer be a situation where we have to have a gulf between the rulers and then those that are ruled. Because that is why you find some people telling you, oh, there are people in Venezuela that are happy because of what is happening. When you don't take your people along, they don't benefit from the commonwealth. And it happens like this, you find those who have been suffering coming out to rejoice and do this. So what African nations should the lessons from here for Africa is that they should take governance more serious, and that what they need to do is to build institutions. If institutions in Venezuela were strong and working, we are not saying it would have been impossible, but it would have been much more difficult than it was to take a president out of a country like that. And like we hear people talk about it, people talk on the streets. If that could happen in Venezuela, what do you think will be if it is Africa? Because African states are more vulnerable than those people are. So we need to look inward and build stronger nations. Like America is doing, they are sending a signal not just to Venezuela or or the Caribbean, Latin America, is to the whole world that we can come for anybody at any time. And Africa needs to come together. The African Union need to take its business very serious at this time. The ECOWAS need to be serious about what they are doing. This is no longer a time for Africans to talk with in discordant tones. We need to come together and take governance very seriously.
So this reflects, more on governance, that the government of the day should begin to sit up, do what is needed, basically, because this seems like a power move.
Yeah.
And okay, then this brings me to the question: what do you think China and Russia will do, in response to all of this?
Well, this issue is complex and complicated. Somehow, what the United States is doing is beyond Venezuela. Russia, China, they are also implicated in it. The anti-U.S. sentiment in Venezuela, really, some have interpreted it, is in favor of Russia and China. They get more of the oil in Venezuela. So what America is trying to do is to bring in a pro-American government that will be able to shift attention from China, from Russia to the United States. So they are quite aware that what happens in Venezuela in this struggle will also affect them. But what we cannot say for sure at this time is the actions they will take. I know they will be thinking, also plotting what to do in a circumstance. And that will become very clear to us in the days ahead.
A couple of countries have come up to condemn, countries like Cuba, even Spain as well. But then again, Donald Trump has made it very clear that no one should interfere in what's happening there at the moment. Now, that begins to give you a concern about his authoritarian nature. As a community of nations, what can we do to make sure that we don't have such entities, if you call them such, rising who are beyond, the laws, international laws? For example, like what's happening with the UN. The UN is like, well, some would say, sadly, like a bulldog without a teeth as it stands right now. They can't do their sanctions and all that kind of thing. But what can be done structurally in the community of nations to see how we avoid such overpowering nations loading themselves as the world police, as many have called them?
Yeah, as a community of nations, where we've done the much that we can do. Several countries, have blamed Donald Trump for what they have done. But I think what we have to do essentially is to look inward at the continental level, at the national level. We have to re-examine the implication of sovereignty. Sovereignty is not just that a country is independent. It also means that a country should be able to protect its people, to defend its people, to feed its people. Now, if you cannot do this, you have lost sovereignty. Now, what we know about sovereignty is that, okay, you are just sovereign. You have authority over the land, it's your country, but you can do anything to your people. I think we should have gone past, that concept of sovereignty. We should now redefine what that should mean. We should respect our citizens. If we respect our citizens and we do policies that actually enhance their existence, we will not give opportunity for countries to be involved in the things that we do. Now, Venezuela has almost 2% people live in poverty. 82% of people live in poverty, and 53% of them live in extreme poverty, to the point that they cannot even buy essential foodstuff. And this is a country that has so much of oil. Why? Because of the nature of government. So I think that if the institutions were strong, if government was pro-people, I mean, even the guards would not have let him into the betrayal.
So does this mean in any way that just probably Nicolas Maduro was not the best of presidents? Because some persons called him a dictator.
Yeah.
So you think that gave room for this?
Well, there was civil disaffection. Many of the people were not happy about the system. And the moment you have, this kind of feeling, in a society, it gives room for betrayal, for disloyalty to be expressed. So I think that was one of the incentives, that made Donald Trump invasion to succeed.
Okay, so recently there's been talks around Nigeria and America. I came across something on social media down here in Nigeria in Africa, where someone saw a helicopter parading an area for a long time, and the person said, "Please, this is not Aso Rock. Please, you should go to Aso Rock, not here." So where do you think? Gleaning from this particular situation and seeing that America somewhat had access to the sites where they bombed in recent time in Nigeria for the good of Nigeria, but how do you think Nigeria can be best positioned, to or other African nations in this case, to avert any of such situations happening?
Invasion.
Yeah, in our own soil.
Yeah, I think we have made reference to that. We said there is need for us to really reorientate ourselves and begin to ask ourselves what governance should be. What is the essence of governance? What is the essence of independence? What is the essence of sovereignty? And how do we tackle the fundamental problems and challenges of nation building among these countries we are talking? For example, in Nigeria, if the government, we have the serious problem of insecurity. Everywhere, life is not safe, property are not safe. You get up today, they are bombing one place or the other. And there are some narratives out there that is not because government is incapable. That is just because they are trying to protect some interests. And if you see what is happening, you tend to believe some of those stories. So what government should do is to come out and fight insecurity. Government should be seen to be working, protecting the interests, the welfare, and the well-being of the citizens. If government is seen to be doing that and people find result in it, I think people will really be committed to such a government. And if there is any foreign invasion, people will not be happy about it. The people will come out to celebrate because there is hopelessness in the land. And like we say, there is so much poverty, and in fact, is something that runs across history. You find out that nations that are rich with oil resources tend to be the poorest nations of the world. It's not only in Venezuela, even in Nigeria, the greater majority of the people cannot feed themselves. They cannot pay the bills, and the tax are increasing on daily basis. You find individuals that are stupendously rich, but for the masses, the infrastructures are not working. And so, what African nations need to do is to begin to take this contract between the ruler and the rule very seriously. When you get into power, you should know that power is not just gotten for its own sake. Power is not gotten for your family and friends. This power is a trust that has been given to you by the people, and people expect so much from you. It's not that at the end of the 4 years, then you come for campaign and bring rice and bring salt and bring maggi. That is not what governance is. That is not how nations are built. So when you build nations that are strong, we find nations that were at parallel with African nations today, they are moving into a different realm entirely. But Africans are still underdeveloping, they are still underdeveloped, and we are not here nor there. So there is the urgent imperative for governance to be taken very seriously to guide against this kind of thing. We also find it in people living the country. Why are people living? Because of the situations that they find themselves. And some are living through circumstances that they put life itself at risk. Some of them don't even get to their destination. So we should make Africa a place that people will desire to stay. People will like to work, people will like to come in. And if that happens, the economies will be stronger than they are today. And it will also increase security. Security today is not just carrying guns and arms, it's also the welfare of the people should be taken very seriously.
Right. Well, just before we wrap things up right now, I'd like to just ask Dr. Boypa, what are your thoughts as to the strength of our alliances in Africa? For example, we have the AU, we also have the ECOWAS as well. Do you think these alliances have done enough to build that fortitude, whereby even if there's an invasion of some sort or an intervention, we can come together and kick against it? Or do you think we are still a little bit too loose, as a result, making individual countries vulnerable?
Yeah, the fact that there are even cracks in the alliances means there's something wrong fundamentally. 3 countries are opted out of ECOWAS, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. So ECOWAS is no longer what ECOWAS used to be. Now it applies to the African Union and other bodies. Now, the reason is that, you see, we're concerned about African independence. Independence as opposing European exploitation. But we're not looking at post-colonial, the future post-colonial. We have not looked at the role of France, which is still very, very important and troubling in the continent. So that means we were short-sighted when we talk about, independence. Now, as we speak, I can't say Africa is truly independent, because so much of Africa is still being controlled by outside, especially France. So how can you move when you are not truly independent? I think one thing I have to deal with, Africa has to go back to talk about its independence. Just like, Mali had told you, France, go your way. Let France actually go its way and relate with Africa, the West, other countries relate with Africa on the basis of equality. So I think the alliances are not actually working. That's one reason. The other reason is that Africans are not truly concerned, about making the alliances to work. We depend so much on outside funding. Why are we not funding ECOWAS? Why are we not funding African Union? We are not. We depend on other countries to fund African Union, to fund the project and program of design, to sustain the African Union. That's not how it works. We need personal sacrifice, personal responsibility, which we are not ready, to make. So I doubt the efficacy of African Union, the efficacy of even ECOWAS, until we go back to the drawing board and identify our deficiencies.
Okay, well, I think that's touching back home here in Africa. There is a great need for us to strengthen our alliances. Otherwise, individual nations become very vulnerable to. It's almost as though I could touch this nation because I know that no one will come to support them. So.
And then we'll even have citizens applauding you for it. Take, for instance, what happened practically in Nigeria. On Christmas Day. First, the only thing, Donald Trump said to us was, "Merry Christmas to terrorists." And we had Nigerians celebrating even before we got the clarity that it was government approved, Nigerian government approved. We had Nigerian citizens applauding that and saying, yes, finally someone has come to our rescue. It felt like Daniel had come to judgment, But then, just like Prof. Imbua has rightly said, nothing. And then you, of course, Bisong, you added that nothing absolutely comes for free when it has to do with America's interference with other nations.
Absolutely.
So yes, I would agree that it is time for African government independently to rise up to their sovereignty, guard their nations, form unity, and protect the interest of their citizens. Well, it's been a wonderful roll conversation.
Yeah, so far so good. Well, this is a chapter in this particular adventure of the African Diaspora channel, a podcast, like we said, which gives you a window into the experiences of the African. Of course, also opportunities as well. Lots of things which to look forward to on this particular platform, and also Africans' thoughts as to what's happening around the world, which is what we just shared with you here today. Yes, I want to say thanks to my brothers.
Thank you.
Yeah. Of course, we had just to my right here, we had Dr. Boypa and also Professor Dave Imbua. Both of them are lecturers from History International Studies in the University of Calabar here in Nigeria. All right.
And my name is Miriam Ani. I did enjoy my time here. I'm sure you did. So until we come your way again, which would be pretty soon, stay with us and enjoy yourself.
Absolutely. My name is Emmanuel Beeson. As some call me the Boki man with a fuck in Bakara kind of swagger. Don't worry, explanations maybe in the next episode. Take care.